All right, welcome. This is Visual Studio in 5 minutes. The goal here is not to explain all of the crazy features that Visual Studio has. It is simply to point out 3 basic things: the debugger, the step into, the step over button, and also to separate the idea of build and debug. So let's step right into it. We're going to have this little bit of C code here. And you might want to just hit that green button, which does a build and run in one step. The problem is, however, in Visual Studio, when you build and run, if the build fails, it will still run. It will just run an old version of code, which can be very confusing because you will be changing your code and it won't be compiling, but it'll still be running, and it's just not really clear what's going on. So I recommend students always run build solution, wait for the build to succeed. If you are suspicious, you can run clean, and then you can run build solution. It'll go through all of your warnings. You'll see a succeeded, and then do the debug, start debugging button. When you get used to the flow that there is a build step and then there is a run step, and when you're working in compiled languages that those are 2 separate things, then you can start using this green button again. But until then, I recommend build the solution and then you go to debug. So, what does debug mean? Debug is a great little tool. Let's actually call this function some function. Okay. So in this little margin here, we're going to click in that little spot. And let's put another one like right there. Okay. So now we're going to go to build solution. We're going to go to debug and start debugging. All right. So what are we looking at? The computer, the debugger, is stopped right before it executes this line of code. So this line of code has not run yet, and we're about to run it. And so we can ask the computer to, run like normally and just zip through the whole program, or we can ask the program to take one single step. And that's what we're going to do here with this step over button. So step over button can kind of be a misnomer. It's not that you're stepping over and avoiding that line. It's that you're doing that line of code. So you do it. Okay. And now you see that we have a new variable here, I, and it has a value of 0. Now if we do this again, what do you think is going to happen? We'll get a new variable that gets declared, and it'll be an F. And we can keep going and keep getting more and more variables that get declared. Okay, so now in our locals window here, we have all of these little variables, and they all have intermediate states. So now we haven't run printf yet, so if we look at the console here, it hasn't printed out our integer yet, which has the value 0, but we can actually go in here and change it. Let's change it to 5. It's supposed to be 0, but we manually changed it to 5. And now if we hit the step over button, step over, you can see that it printed out the 5, which is just the value that we asked for. So we've been using step over, and it's the button I use by default. And here we're going to need a floating point value, so that's cool. Step over. Now we get to step into. Some function is a function that we wrote. It's something that we want the debugger to follow into that function. So we say step into, and that goes into that function, step into, and then we resume with the step overs and step overs. And here you see we have our local values I, and now that I has the value of 9, which is separate from this I in the outer scope, right? So if we step out, so complete that function, and now we're done, and we're back to the I that's in the main function with a value of 5. That's it. That's debugging, build, run. That is the basics to get you started, and it also gives you some more tools than just debugging your code with basic printf. So basic printf, definitely useful, but every once in a while you want a debugger and you can step over and step into. Thank you.